Men aren't breaking because we're weak. We men are breaking because we were raised in these systems that taught us to treat our emotions like enemies and to treat our humanity like a liability. The world, if you will, conditioned us to believe that numbness is strength, that silence is maturity, that stillness is stoicism, and that swallowing our pain makes us more of a man. We were handed this mythology, if you will, of masculinity before we were ever given this chance to understand ourselves in the first place. And what's wild is how convincingly we swallowed it. We internalized those scripts so young, so consistently that most of us never paused long enough to notice the architecture of the cage that we were growing up in. We, we just assumed that it was normal, that it was expected, it was inevitable. But let's stop pretending the cost has been normal, shall we? Because it hasn't. The cost has been catastrophic. It's been quietly hollowing out the emotional interior of men for generations. It's been severing us from our own bodies, our own breath, our own softness, our own worth. And only now are we recalibrating to the truth that most of the distance that we feel inside of ourselves, most of the shutdown that we experience in relationships, like most of the confusion that we carry around with us, most of the numbness that we normalize, and even most of the anger that we erupt with, all of these are just traces back to one thing, and that is we were never taught how to feel without falling apart. We were never taught how to, we were taught how to perform for sure, but we were never taught how to inhabit ourselves. And here's where we need to start widening the lens. Here at Uber Bintegers, our work brings men back into the body, not to harden them, but to sharpen, and not even to sharpen some edge that they think they're missing, not even to turn it into caricatures of what the masculine ideal is, but in essence to return to the place where our strength actually lives. See, integrity is part of us that refuses to lie to ourselves anymore. And intimacy is that part of us that refuses to disconnect from what we feel. And when integrity and intimacy both align, when our insides begin matching our outsides, value-wise, something inside of us begins to unclench. Something remembers how to breathe. Something in us remembers how to be human again. And this is the work that every man deserves. To come home to himself in a way that he's never really been allowed to. Because the truth is simple but brutal. Most of us weren't raised with emotional skill. We were raised with emotional shutdown. We were raised with the vocabulary of suppression, the culture of silence, the training of self-abandonment. And we hear it in phrases like man up, or stop crying, or don't make a scene, right? Or don't be so dramatic. Nobody cares about your feelings. Be strong, right? You've heard these, right? I mean, these weren't just phrases. These were the emotional commandments of this unspoken religion, one that was built by like generations of people who were terrified of their own softness and who had no idea how to metabolize emotion. We didn't inherit wisdom, we inherited avoidance. We inherited fear that was disguised as strength. We inherited fragility that was dressed up like discipline. And so we learned very early that tears were dangerous. We learned very early that honesty had consequences. We learned that our vulnerability was a liability. And we learned further that our softness invited ridicule. We learned that to armor up before ever learning how to identify what we felt was how we survived. Most of us can maybe trace all this back to a moment, right? There might have been a laugh from someone that we trusted, or a mocking comment from a classmate, or a frustrated look from a parent who didn't really know what to do with their own feelings. It might have come from a partner who punished our openness and our vulnerability, or a coach who taught shame instead of support. I mean, we can perhaps trace all this shutdown back to an instant when we realized that the being human is risky. And that moment came, like it became our blueprints that we carried into adulthood. And now here's where the shift begins to hit even harder. And that's emotion doesn't just disappear. Emotion just relocates. It goes into the jaw, it goes into the chest, into our breath, into the stomach, into the long nights that we can't sleep, or into those mornings where we wake up super early and feel heavy, in the tension that we treat as normal, in the anger that just feels like it comes out of nowhere, into the silence that we use to protect ourselves, into the distance that we keep even from the people we love dearest. Suppressed emotion doesn't die, it just becomes sediment. It becomes pressure. It becomes these patterns that we don't really understand, but we still live out anyway. And the truth cuts even sharper here, because men don't break when they cry. Men break when they stop themselves from crying, I would say. That's the moment that the body receives this chilling message that says, my feelings aren't safe with me. My truth is unacceptable. My inner world must thus stay hidden. And once that message is internalized, it doesn't just shut down the tears. It shuts down the emotional access altogether. It builds a wall so thick that we forget how to lower it. And everything after this just becomes performance. And here's where the pacing shifts again. See, from that point on, we master composure, but we lose connection. We become exceptional at surviving, but terrible at receiving care. We become reliable, but unreachable. We become stable, but emotionally unavailable. We become protectors who can't really be protected. We become providers who can't be provided for, and leaders who cannot admit it when they're lost. And when we learn how to carry the weight, but we forget what it feels like to rest, when we become more emotionally self-sufficient in the most damaging way, the kind of self-sufficiency that looks admirable on the outside but quietly suffocates us on the inside, we have arrived at an alarming place. So we walk around like these emotional storage units, holding way more than any human nervous system was ever designed to carry alone. And then we wonder why our patience is thin. We wonder why our hearts feel heavy, and why our bodies just feel exhausted, why our relationships feel so distant, and why numbness becomes normal for us, why our anger becomes our default language, if you will, and why peace feels so inaccessible. None of this is random. This is what happens when tears refuse to be released. They become the backlog that our bodies can't keep carrying. And here comes the deeper truth, and that is that when we stop crying, we start corroding. We men begin rotting from the inside out, slowly and quietly and privately, because the body will not let us bury what we were meant to release. It will bring it forward in other ways, through tension and through illness and withdrawal and irritability and sharpness that masquerades as impatience, through sadness that feels like fatigue, through fear that disguises itself as indifference, through grief that becomes bitterness, and disappointment that just becomes distance. Emotion will find its exit. And if we don't let it move through tears, it will move through damage, I think. We've been told for decades that crying is collapse. But crying actually is calibration. Crying is the nervous system releasing pressure that was never meant to be stored forever. Crying is the body's unclenching after years of bracing. Crying is the heart finally exhaling. It's the truth that melts the places where we've been hardened. Crying is the moment's survival mode loosens its chokehold just long enough to let healing slip through. Now, let me see if I can expand this frame a bit more. When we cry from groundedness and not from panic, not from collapse, not from emotional spectacle, but from grounded honesty, we don't disintegrate. We reintegrate. Our breath can deepen, our shoulders can now drop, our thinking becomes clearer, our nervous system stops firing like we're in danger. And then our hearts can re-enter the room again. Our presence will have the ability to expand. And the parts of us that we thought were gone begin returning again. A man who can cry without collapsing is not fragile. He is fluent. He speaks the language of his own nervous system. He can feel without drowning. He can release without unraveling. He can express without imploding. This is the place men are never told about. And you cannot build integrity without emotional honesty. You cannot build intimacy without emotional availability. And you cannot build worth without being emotionally present. If we're cut off from our tears, we're in essence cut off from every signal that tells us what really matters. Tears reconnect us to our internal compass. They reveal what hurts, what needs attention, what needs healing, what needs reclaiming. They, in essence, bring us back to our actual selves. Worth is not a thinking problem. Worth is a feeling problem. And if we cannot feel, we cannot access it. Most men don't lack clarity. We lack emotional permission. We don't feel like we deserve to feel in the first place. And the reason we don't feel like we deserve to feel is because we've been emotionally malnourished for decades, sometimes even for generations. Crying is one of the ways that worth can come back online. Not the only way, but a crucial way, I would say. When tears finally come, the old ones, the clogged ones, the ones attached to memories that we've never really spoken out loud, the ones that are tied to disappointments that we minimized once upon a time, the ones that come from years of pretending, let me tell you, those tears clear emotional debris. They make space for self-recognition. They create the inner room where worth can finally breathe again. No, we don't cry because we're weak. We cry because we've carried more than a human nervous system should ever be asked to carry alone. And crying is what allows the body to stop bracing. Crying is what gives the heart room to recalibrate. Crying is what lets truth settle into alignment. And here's where the pacing softens and deepens. Emotional mastery begins with emotional honesty. Mastery is not about stiffening up. It's not about suppressing. It's not about holding everything inside until we explode, nor about acting unaffected. Real mastery means feeling deeply while staying rooted. It means letting emotion move through the body without abandoning ourselves. It means staying present, even amidst the trembling. It means honoring truth, even when it's inconvenient. Emotional mastery is integrity. Integrity in motion. Emotional mastery is intimacy with our own inner world. Emotional mastery is openness, if you will, that's expressed with courageousness. This is what we step into when we stop performing manhood and instead start inhabiting it. Inhabiting manhood means being present with ourselves instead of policing ourselves. It means trusting our inner world instead of fearing it. It means that now we're willing to welcome our own humanity instead of trying to outrun it. It means that now we're allowing the body to speak the language that we've ignored for far too long. On my website, I have a course. It's titled Inside the Ash, like in the Ashes of the Alpha Male. And here I walk through this reconnection, not with dramatics, but with with like with this grounded, steadied, embodied work that we go through together. It's an integrated offering where I want to guide men through rebuilding emotional capacity from the inside out. How to feel without drowning, how to speak without collapsing, how to stay open without being engulfed, how to stop bracing and how to stop abandoning ourselves in conflicts, and how to let tears come without shame. It's not about making men emotional, but more so about making men whole. And here's the truth I think that we rarely say out loud. Wholeness is what most of us have been craving. We've wanted emotional safety, but really haven't known how to build it in the first place. We've wanted connection, but we couldn't really stay open long enough to receive it. We've wanted strength, but we didn't really know how to access it without performing it. We've wanted peace, but couldn't stop bracing for impact. We've wanted intimacy, but we've kept shutting down the pathways that make intimacy possible. So when the tears come, let them come. Let them soften what's hardened. Let them loosen what's tight. Let them rinse out the parts of you that haven't seen light for years. Let them unclog what grief has been clogging all this time. Let them release what anger has been guarding. Let them, if you will, unfreeze what fear has been locking away. Let them create the inner space where something new can finally grow, right? And when they fall, stand. Not smaller, and not scattered, but steadier and clearer, more honest, more human, more whole, more you, who no longer has to brace against your own emotions because you're just trying to survive another day holding back the tears. Because tears don't make us soft. Tears make us supple enough to be able to stand tall again. Tears make us less brittle, if you will, less reactive, less armored. Tears make us more present, more grounded, more available. Tears make us strong enough, if you will, to stop pretending. And here's where the road bends toward the next truth that we want to name, and that is, if tears can reveal what's been buried, anger reveals what's been abandoned. So this is where our next episode is going to take us, because most of the anger that men carry, the explosive kind, the unpredictable kind, the quiet, simmering kind, this anger is not rooted in aggression. It's rooted in pain. It's rooted in wounds that we never had the language to name. It's rooted in abandonment. The internal abandonment, perhaps, that we lived inside for so long that we forgot that this isn't normal. So that's in episode 18 tomorrow. Anger as a mask for abandonment. And trust me, we're about to get right to the bone. But that's in tomorrow's episode. Thank you for listening to this one here. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. How did this episode land with you? Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? I would love to invite you into that conversation. Engage with me, will you? I'll see you in tomorrow's episode.